So at this time, I'm honored to have Steve Hennessy join me on stage to introduce the governor. And following the governor's remarks, Raphael Bostic and the governor will engage in a conversation about economic development and leadership. So let me turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, President John. Good afternoon, Atlanta Rotary. What a great crowd we have today. This is really exciting. To today's distinguished guest, Governor Brian Kemp, I'd just like to say, howdy, stranger. To Marty, the First Lady, I'd like to say welcome back. We all thoroughly enjoyed your program just a few weeks ago from this stage. Marty, you are now part of the rich history of our 112-year-old, 10-year-old club. You are the First Lady to ever speak to Atlanta Rotary before her husband. COVID upended the world, and it upended Rotary's probably 100-plus year tradition of our annual address from the governor and from the mayor every year. So I think this is Brian's first time with us, early into his second term, and it is a treat to finally have you here. It's always interesting to be invited to introduce a special guest that needs no introduction. So instead of a traditional introduction, I wanted to express on behalf of Atlanta Rotary our appreciation and gratitude, Brian, for the outstanding leadership you've provided since coming into office. In keeping with President John's theme this year of lessons in leadership, I think when the history books are written, your legacy as a two-term governor will certainly be the steadfast leadership you displayed during COVID and the incredible success you and Georgia has enjoyed under your leadership when it comes to economic development and economic opportunity for all Georgians. COVID. Hindsight can sometimes be a wonderful thing. And when it comes to how you led Georgia during those trying times, your insights and your principles that guided all the decisions you made, oftentimes under intense criticism from both near and far, proved you were right all along. Being the last state to shut down and the first state to reopen has benefited all Georgians, especially our children. The latest national scholastic test scores, registering the largest declines in test performance ever recorded, demonstrates Brian's belief that children learn best in the classroom and needed to be back in the classroom. Economic development. If there's ever going to be a Hall of Fame for economic development in this country, I am sure that Brian and Pat Wilson will be first-round inductees. Since January the 14th of 2019 to June 15th of this year, over 1,600 new businesses have located or expanded in Georgia. New jobs, over 65,000 new jobs. Investment in Georgia, over $65 billion. Close to home, 3 or 4 blocks away. Last Monday morning, before Rotary, I had an early 2.5-hour behind-the-scenes tour of Grady Hospital. Our first stop was the emergency operating room, where Dr. Robert Todd, head of Grady ER, made a point to commend Brian and the state of Georgia for their leadership when they provided, after the sudden closure of Atlanta Medical Center, by providing $130 million to Grady to build 168 additional inpatient beds, all of which will be open by the end of the year. Fiscal stewardship. Last week in the paper, I read that for the second year in a row, Georgia will finish the fiscal year with a $5 billion plus surplus. Law and order. All Atlantans owe you a debt of gratitude, Brian, for restoring law and order to the city less than 24 hours after the civil unrest on Friday evening of Memorial Day 2020. Gangs and human trafficking. All Georgians have benefited greatly by the intense focus Brian, Chris Carr, the Attorney General Office has brought to shutting down the violent gang activity that is such a major statewide problem, as is the plague of human trafficking we recently heard about from the First Lady. I could go on, but I won't. Would all of you please join me in giving Governor Brian Kemp a warm Atlanta welcome.
Thank y'all very much. Thank you. Steve, I feel like after that introduction, we all just moved to the Q&A. I kid people all the time, Marty will agree with this, but when you've been governor during COVID, civil unrest, and the 2020 election, it's like serving in dog years. I feel like I've been in office like about 30 years right now. But I appreciate Regent Dallas Smith's prayer and praying for Marty and I. And I would just tell you, Randall, if I could sing like you do, I wouldn't be in politics, man. That was great. But we're so honored to be with you. I know Marty had a great time here just a few weeks ago, and I'm certainly looking forward to the opportunity to be with you all. It's just incredible, really, what our First Lady's done. I tell people all the time she's the greatest First Lady in the country, but she's also done the best work of anybody at the state level with the Grace Commission and a lot of our partners in state government on ending human trafficking, going after the perpetrators, but also helping the victims. And I know you heard about that, but it's pretty incredible what they've been able to do. I'm looking forward to my conversation with Raphael Bostwick in just a few minutes. I was just thinking while I was eating, I think it'd be better if I was questioning him instead of him questioning me. I don't know if we can change the format at this time, but I was just thinking that might be kind of good too. But I just appreciate his leadership. We got a chance to catch up just a few weeks ago, and I've been talking obviously to a lot of economists about where we sit and just the uncertainty, but also optimism that's out there. And we had a great discussion about that. I want to just thank John and Gina and the rest of the Rotary Club for having me today, and I just appreciate really this club's commitment. I mean, what you're doing on education and the financial commitments that you all have already made as a club is incredible, and we're very grateful for that. And I certainly want to thank President Cabrera and President Blake. They are doing one of the most important things in state government, and that is creating our future workforce. And we love them and need more of them. It's something that we sell every day in Georgia, and we're very proud of what they're doing. I'm also proud that this club is 110 years old. That's pretty incredible. So congratulations to you all for that and for continuing to do a lot of great work, not only here in the city, but also in our state. You know, I mentioned before that you all are an important partner in ending human trafficking. There's been so many Rotary clubs that have been so gracious to Marty around the state, and we just very much appreciate that. But you're also very important partners when it comes to bringing more jobs and opportunities to our state. And I'm very proud to report, even in this just such an uncertain environment that we've been talking about literally for over a year now, the good news in Georgia is we have more people working in our state than ever in the state's history, which is pretty incredible. Our unemployment rate remains near historic lows, and as Steve mentioned, we've had back-to-back record-breaking years for both economic development and trade. Just in a few days ahead, we'll be announcing the numbers for this past fiscal year that will show even more milestones. Last year, we again earned the coveted ranking as the #1 state in the country for business for a 9th year in a row. And this ranking is coming from, not somebody's opinion, but it's coming from the people that are actually the site selectors, the ones that are working with our clients that are looking all over the country. They're the ones that are saying this, and that to me is very important. This morning we made more history in our state, both for Georgia, but also I believe for the United States of America as a whole, by officially turning on the first nuclear power reactor in the United States of America in over 30 years at Plant Vogtle. I haven't seen Kim Green, but I was told she was here. Kim, are you here? Congratulations and thank you and Georgia Power for your commitment. Marty and I were there with you. We were just a few hundred feet over the clouds and could not land, so we were excited to get up at 4 a.m. to fly down there and not be able to land and be with you. But it is an incredible day, really, to think about it. Just how many people, Governor Deal, the legislature, Paul Bowers, Kemp, Chris Womack, just all the people that hung in there through all the trials and tribulations. But our state will be better off for this, and our environment will be too, and it's something that we sell every single day. So congratulations. Steve mentioned all the job numbers, so I won't go over that again. I'll just tell you, it's been incredible. We're in the middle of an industrial revolution in our state, I believe. The numbers that we've announced just on projects that the state's been involved with have been incredible, not only in the metro Atlanta, but particularly around other parts of the state. The last couple of years, in our record years, 85% of the investment, well over the majority of jobs, has gone to rural parts of our state. And that's a good thing for our metro cities as well, not only Atlanta, but Augusta and Savannah, because a lot of the bigger companies that we have in the state, if you think about UPS, for instance, their customers are all these people that are creating new jobs and new business in rural parts of our state. So it's good for our diverse economy for us to be growing jobs in all parts of the state. And just the generic growth that we're seeing in the city of Atlanta and the metro region, not only here, but also in Augusta, Columbus, Macon, and Savannah, as well as even Albany and Southwest Georgia, has just been incredible the last 3 or 4 years, especially coming off of COVID. So we're very excited about that, but not resting on our laurels. This is not going to last forever. A lot of people are making big decisions right now to invest now and in the next couple of years. So it's very important for us to keep our pedal to the metal, if you will, and just grinding away every day, which is what our team's doing. And we have, as Steve mentioned, Pat Wilson, we have the best economic development team in the country. There's no doubt about that, and very proud of them. Also, just wanted to mention public safety. I know Steve touched on this very briefly, but we are continuing to stay vigilant in making criminals accountable. And no matter how good the incentives are, job creators don't want to come to our state if they're not confident that their employees and their business is going to be safe. That's why over 2 years ago we created the Crime Suppression Unit, because quite honestly I got fed up with so many people calling me going, we got people street racing, we have home invasions, we have, drug deals going down, and somebody needs to do something. And so we did. And I've been very pleased, especially of late, with our working relationship with the Atlanta Police Department, Chief Sherbaum, the mayor's office, and a lot of other partners on the local level, along with state assets and resources that we have, whether it's GBI, State Patrol, Community Supervision, the Department of Natural Resources. We've now done, just in our Crime Suppression Unit alone, over 52,000 vehicle stops almost 1,200 DUIs. What's incredible is our brave men and women in law enforcement in just 2 years have been involved in almost 1,200 pursuits, which is very dangerous work. And we've arrested almost 860 people who had outstanding warrants, 34 of them for murder. Over 360 drug-related arrests. We've recovered an unbelievable 670 stolen vehicles worth over $14 million and much more. So they're doing a great job, and we're going to continue to be involved in that and supporting those efforts. And we're not only doing that in Atlanta, we're doing that in other parts of the state when we're asked as well. I'm also very proud, as Steve mentioned, that our fight against gangs is producing incredible results. I want to thank the members of the General Assembly that have supported our budget items, not only for the GBI, but also the Attorney General's office. The gang task force that we have created at GBI early in my administration has investigated 446 gang-related cases across 100 different counties and charged more than 170 gang members last year alone. So literally, this is a statewide issue. The gang prosecution unit we created in the Attorney General's office just over a year ago has already indicted 85 gang members. We're proud of that work, but we also cannot let up. And that's why this year I signed Senate Bill 44, which increases penalties for those who recruit our children into a life of crime. And as I said in my State of the State address, you come after our children, we will be coming after you. And that's the message that we have for people. Also, I know Marty probably talked about this, but we signed another piece of anti-human trafficking legislation, SB 42, which increases penalties for those who fail to post human trafficking hotline notifications. That is the 8th piece of legislation that we have passed with Marty's leadership. She probably told y'all this, but this bill had one person that voted against it. It's the first no vote of all 8 pieces of legislation in 5 legislative sessions, so pretty impressive record. But also our human trafficking prosecution unit in the Attorney General's office with Hannah Palmquist. This was created early on in the administration. They've rescued 116 victims last year alone and have over a 100% conviction rate. So a lot of really good people doing a lot of great work. These measures will continue to build on our prior work, including enhancing penalties for fleeing and eluding law enforcement and making it more difficult to profit from organized retail crime, which is not only a big problem in our state, but it's a big problem across the rest of the country. And we worked with the private sector here in Georgia on that legislation. But again, we will not let up. We have just such a great state. Somebody mentioned earlier, the best state in the country to live, work, and raise our children, and my goal is to keep it that way over the next 3.5 years or so, and you all are a big part of that. I tell people all the time that we have such great quality of life in Georgia, and a lot of that has to do with people like you giving back, being focused on our young people that will become the workforce of tomorrow. And to be able to do that, we have to continue to stay vigilant and to stay involved, and we're doing that. We're funding K through 12 education and higher education more than ever before in Georgia's history, and we're going to continue to help students access opportunity. And one way we did that this past legislative session was restoring the Hope Scholarship to 100% of tuition, which is really monumental for our families. And that's building off of last year when we did away with the institutional fee. So really, higher education cost in Georgia has gone down in this inflationary environment, which is incredible. There's still a lot of challenges on campus. I know that the presidents will tell you with those inflationary costs, but we just appreciate what you guys and Regent Smith and his colleagues have done when it comes to higher education in the state of Georgia. We're also working to ensure that the education pathways align with job opportunities that are out there in our state. And later this year, my office will host a workforce summit where we're going to be bringing together all of the stakeholders, from job creators like many of you all in the room to education providers, but also policymakers to tackle that issue. One thing that I'm really excited to give you an update on, last year I signed an executive order that created the Small Business and Supplier Diversity Manager position at the Department of Administrative Services, making our state procurement process more accessible to minority, women, and veteran-owned small businesses. This year, we followed up that with HB 128, which streamlines and expands access to state certifications on those same small businesses. Something that we should also celebrate is that Georgia has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation for African Americans and Hispanic Americans, well below the national average, according to the Economic Policy Institute. Georgia is, and it should remain, a place where all people have access to opportunity. What all of this past and future success really boils down to is that our commitment to strong partnerships on both the state and the local level. Many of the faces I see here today have played important roles in that success, and I want to thank you all on behalf of the state of Georgia for that. I also want to again just thank the members of the General Assembly who have been incredible partners in our economic development efforts and many other things. The historic projects that we've announced over the past several years would not have been possible without them. Together, we will continue that good work and celebrate new milestones as you're doing this year with your 110th anniversary. So thank you all again for having Marty earlier and both of us today. It's been an honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Governor, for your remarks. We will not be changing the format, just so you're aware of that. But we are going to.
I'm clear on that.
We are going to go a little off script, though. So at our bank, one of the things we do for every employee on their first day is I meet with them. And I ask them, where did you grow up? And give me one interesting fact that you don't think other people know about you. So, Governor, what is that fact for you?
All right, so we grew up in Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs. Sorry. Apologize to our president.
That was the freebie. That was the freebie.
I think Steve had mentioned that I was the 53rd governor. I'm actually the 83rd governor. But an interesting fact you may not know about me is that I'm married to the 87th First Lady. So you can think about that just a little bit.
You just went a place I didn't think we were gonna. No, so that was interesting. That's why.
A little Georgia history a lot of people don't know about.
But this is why I love this question. You never know what you're going to get. It's really quite interesting.
That was the safest thing I could come up with to say.
Well, then we need to have you back, because one of my other rules is you're not allowed to repeat interesting facts. So if that's that's the safest one, I'll see you next year. That'll be a lot of fun. All right. So the theme for us is leadership and economic development, and as you know, there is tremendous competition that every community, I go around and every community is trying to attract businesses. How are you doing this? Like, how are you organizing the state's resources to be an effective, competitive agent for businesses? Like, what is that secret sauce? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, we measure everything we're doing. We try to be very consistent with how we're treating all of our private sector partners that we're trying to get to move to the state, or expansions that companies are doing that may qualify for different tax credits, incentives. I mean, the good thing in Georgia is a lot of that's built in the statute. So it's just a policy of our state. It's not arbitrary. But we're competing against states that will just give cash handouts, which we cannot do because of the gratuities clause in the state constitution. So a good example of this is, I think it was South Carolina, when they got the Stellantis, I guess it's maybe a Volkswagen plant, but they're going to build the Scout utility vehicle. If anybody remembers the old Scout, they're going to do an electric Scout. They gave a $500 million grant. Just cash grant. They could do whatever they wanted. And so when you're competing for a, $2 or $3 billion project and somebody's giving $500,000 cash, I mean, that's a high hurdle to get over. So we've got, local incentives that the local folks are doing, whether it's property tax abatements, they'll do different road projects, infrastructure, and other things. We can do the same thing. We give jobs tax credit. The good thing is, when you're giving that cash grant, they're giving that up front. And so if they never finish building that plant, you got to go claw that money back. People here are not getting the tax credit till they create that job and that person's on the payroll. And that's, for the most part, not going to be until the plant's built and they're invested and they're working and they're hiring. So I think there's a lot of advantages for the taxpayers from that perspective. But there's no question to me that what sells our state the most, I mean, we can be competitive on incentives, but is having the workforce, which goes back to the university system, also our technical college system, and our K through 12 system, preparing that workforce that we need. But then also just because of our location and just many people long before me investing in infrastructure in this state. When you think about the Atlanta airport, our seaports that we have in Savannah and Brunswick, our interstate, our state road network, our rail network, we just have a lot to offer, and our business environment is as good as anybody else's. I have a lot of people that will come to me and go, hey, you need to get rid of state income tax like they do in Tennessee and Florida. And I said, look, I'm fine doing that, but that's a policy decision. Do you in Tennessee and Florida, I don't think you pay taxes when you go to the grocery store on your food. Our farmers aren't getting tax exemptions, a lot of other things that are out there. So we could work on that. But when you look at the combined local state tax rankings of everybody in the Southeast, Tennessee ranks 1. South Carolina and us are right behind them. And then a lot of people always tell me you need to be like Florida and get rid of state income tax. Well, our tax burden overall is lower than Florida's is. And that's why I always tell people, if you want to go to, if you want to retire or if you want to go to the beach, you go to Florida. If you want to work, raise your family in the best state in the country, you need to come to Georgia.
So that's a line. I don't think I can use that line. Florida is one of my states as well.
Oh, you can use it. You can.
So we'll just have to be. I'll have to be judicious on that. I wanted to just say, you mentioned sort of the workforce and its importance, something that we actually value as well at the Atlanta Fed, and I know the Chamber of Commerce here is doing some work on skills-based hiring. So in your summit, I hope there's a carve out for that, because one of the things we've learned is that a lot of job descriptions are written with requirements that are not linked to the skills you need to do those jobs, and it winds up excluding a lot of people in ways that are not helpful. And so we want to make sure that we're doing those things. So it's a conversation that we should continue to have as you move forward. I actually want to stay on the competitive theme for one bit. As I've gone around the 6th District, one of the things that I've often seen is that the local communities in a region are fighting with each other. And they are actually competing with each other in ways that can discourage businesses from wanting to locate there because they don't want to get in the middle of those squabbles. Like, how would you assess the local interaction and engagement and support for these sort of things in the state of Georgia?
Well, that's a great point. A lot of people probably don't realize this, but our state for a long time has always taken the position, we are not going to get in the middle of the locals trying to land a project. So what we tell them, as long as there's multiple sites in Georgia, multiple jurisdictions involved, we just don't even get involved until the company decides what site in the state of Georgia they're going to consider. Not what 2 sites or 3 sites, but like, what is their site? And then we'll signal that the state will get involved, but like, we're not going to get in the business of picking which local community. We want to let everybody compete. That's the best way for the company to get the best deal. And, I learned very quickly, not every community in Georgia wants those kind of jobs. Like, you go up in parts of North Georgia, some of those communities, you could have a site or something, but the local governments are like, look, we just want to kind of stay the way we are. We want to continue to grow our tourism or our ag industry, we don't want a lot of commercial development. We're not interested in advanced manufacturing and thousands of jobs. We're just going to keep our quality, and that's fine. But the communities that do want to be involved, we will get involved with them. But we're not going to go in there, and we try not to. We really want this to come from the bottom up, because if it's the state trying to drive a project somewhere in the local community, or even some in the local community don't want it, especially the policymakers, makes it really hard to be able to do that.
So a piece of advice I got early in my career for these sort of things is work with the willing.
That's right.
And it sounds like, because otherwise you're just banging your head against the wall and they don't really put their full foot forward as well. As you know, there are lots of leaders here in this room across the region, and they talk to lots of folks. And a lot of times people will come up to them and say, so, what's going on in Georgia? Like, how would we, if we want to locate our business here, what should we do? Is there a place for our folks, our fellow Rotarians, to point folks that are interested in thinking about Georgia as a place to locate, like a one-stop shop or something like that?
Well, I know a lot of people in here got my cell phone number, so you just call me and we'll take it from there. But, really, it happens a lot of ways. Obviously, people know to go to the Georgia Department of Economic Development, but Katie's here with the Metro Chamber. The chambers are driving a lot of this. The local economic developers are our local policymakers. So I think you can kind of go to any of those folks, but obviously, what we normally do, if we get calls at the state, we start pushing them back to the locals and ask them what they're looking for and try to have it come from the bottom up.
All right, very interesting. You mentioned a lot of the workforce stuff. You mentioned job development. When I talk to a number of employers, they'll tell me that it's the full suite of quality of life things that matter. You got to have a good arts scene. You got to have the sports. Another thing that I often hear about is healthcare, and you have to make sure that the healthcare system is robust. And we know that in a lot of rural places, that's gotten a lot more difficult. How are you thinking about healthcare in Georgia and in the region, and the things that policymakers should be doing to advance that?
Well, you're not going to, my apologies if anybody's here from the Atlanta paper, but you're not going to hear many good things in the Atlanta paper about what we've been doing on healthcare policy, especially in rural parts of the state. But the commitment that myself and the members of the General Assembly have made to rural Georgia are really incredible. Plus the waivers that we got passed for access to Medicaid, and also lowering private sector health insurance costs, which you never hear the other side talk about. But driving down costs, especially in rural parts of our state, it's been incredible what we've done with our waivers. And we're the first state in the country to be able to do the Medicaid waiver that, a lot of other people were trying to do that with the work requirement, but we did something really innovative. We have a work requirement, it's 20 hours a week, so 80 hours a month, which is part-time. But you also qualify if you're getting job skills training, if you're in school, even if you're volunteering and giving back to the community, you qualify. So we're very excited about the opportunities that we have there. But if you look, really since 2019, my first legislative session, the amount of money that we put into places like Augusta University Medical College of Georgia, to Mercer's campus in Columbus, all designed to support more rural physicians. Last year in the budget, we put in 500 additional slots for nursing and allied health positions. We put in 137 new residency slots targeted for doctors in rural Georgia. And the program that AU and MCG has is we've got new, and we did this, I think in 19 or the first part of 20, but you can now get a 3-year medical degree instead of 4. And then if you do 3 years of your residency in rural Georgia and then you practice 3 years in rural Georgia, you get your tuition for medical school covered by the state. So it's an incredible deal. But most people, wherever they do their residency, they will land close to that. So our thinking is if we can keep these folks, in rural parts of our state, they'll once they get there, they're going to like that quality of life and they'll stay there. And so we're just now getting that program up and going, but it's going very well. And we built off the AU program and then did the Mercer program. Most of the kids going to Mercer are from more rural parts of our state because that facility is at their Macon campus. So a lot of really good things going on in rural health care. The private sector's doing a lot of good things too. But also I will tell you, if you do not have a tax base in rural communities, you're not going to be able to support a hospital or any kind of medical facility that can handle a big load. So that part of my mission is not only doing all this on the healthcare front, but you've got to have jobs, companies investing. You got to have communities growing population versus losing population. And if you look at what we've done over the last really 4.5 years in rural parts of our state, there's opportunity now that didn't exist. County wages are going up. There's going to be more wealth created. I mean, just the other day we had this manufactured housing modular construction company that went to Waycross, Georgia. 1,400 jobs in Waycross, Georgia. Hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. Battery plant in Bainbridge. $800 million investment in Bainbridge with over 450 jobs. And so, like, those kind of opportunities are going to move the needle in rural parts of our state.
All right, so I'm going to go to questions now. We got a number of them that all are in the theme of something that you mentioned in your remarks, which was that we're undergoing something of an industrial revolution. So I have a number of sector-specific questions. The first has to do with sporting events, like the World Cup. And the question is, can you talk about the important role that public-private partnerships play in hosting things like that?
Well, we're kind of in an industrial revolution with sports in our state too. I saw Dan Corso, and I know Katie and her team, and a lot of other folks have been involved. And I mean, we're so looking forward to the World Cup. But I remember early in my administration, we had the Super Bowl. I think from a fan perspective, it's probably one of the best Super Bowls the fans have ever had. I mean, it's completely walkable venue. I got so many comments about how easy it was, how great it was coming through the Atlanta airport. And so I think we truly showed that we can host that game. The national, the SEC championship, kickoff games, national championship, first state and city to get the repeat on the college football playoff national championship coming back, not this year, but next year. But the World Cup is going to be bigger than anything we've ever seen. So I think all of us are very excited about that, but also we have a lot of work to do. And we've got to provide a lot of security and other things that we're talking to community leaders on. But I would tell you the private sector is vital to all of this. You cannot just do this with local or state government. And so I'm very thankful to our corporate partners that have stepped up and been a part of not only the recruitment process, but like you all are doing is giving back and investing in bringing these events here. And you're kind of betting on the come, right? You're making these commitments, hoping we get these games, and then you'll see the fruits of those labored down the road. So it's very, very important.
The next topic is agriculture. So agriculture, by this estimate, is the biggest industry in Georgia. And we know that there is actually a fair amount of food instability, even in the metro area. So this is not just a rural issue. This is sort of a statewide issue. What are you doing to help farmers and to grow the industry?
Well, we do. Agriculture in Georgia by far is the number one industry in the state, by far. And it's a great exporter for us, and we have a very diverse agriculture in really tough times in our state. When you think back of the recession and the hard times that we were having in the late 2000s, really our ag economy was very good in Georgia, and it helped kind of keep things propped up and kept us going until we came out of that. And so it's a great part of our diverse economy. But there's definitely challenges, and there's a lot of really smart people that are working on, how we don't have as much food waste, how we get that to needy individuals. We've been very involved in food banks, especially during the pandemic. A lot of the commitments that we made were to food banks. We were, I think, the first state in the country that deployed the National Guard to work at our food banks because the volunteers weren't coming in because people were scared about COVID, or either they were told that they could not. And so we were trendsetters there. We passed a bill, I think it was session before last, and put funding in the budget that allowed us to work with farmers if there was a market diversion, and let's say the watermelon market tanked. Normally farmers would just plow those watermelons under and move on, collect on insurance, or it cost them more to get them out of the field than what they would get to pay for it. And so we passed a program, put money in the budget, working with Commissioner Black and now working with Commissioner Tyler Harper over the Department of Agriculture, where we actually have funding now where we can make up the difference to get it to where, you know, it would pay the farmer a little something to get that crop out of the field and then allow that food to get into the marketplace or go to food banks. And so, you know, something that really wasn't talked about a whole lot, but really a good piece of legislation that helps move the needle on that. But there's a lot of people in the local area too that are doing really good work in that space.
Well, that is right. I'll mention two. So Gooder is a company that has been managing a lot of food waste to reduce it. It's been supported heavily by the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Rataza is another one where trying to connect smaller farmers with some urban marketplaces to have them be more sustained. That was invested in by the previous Lieutenant Governor's Partnership for Inclusive Innovation, where we're really trying to prop up and create connections and linkages between various parts of the state. So it's an important thing. I think a lot of folks don't think about agriculture that way, but it's a really important area. Next sector, aerospace. What is Georgia's future in the aerospace industry?
You know, I learned a lot this year about I knew a good bit about our aerospace industry. We've had some great projects that we've announced, but we went to, Marty and I went to the Paris Air Show after we visited the country of Georgia, which we've had been part of the U.S. military partnership over there, that's kind of an interesting visit when you go into a country that the Russians occupy 25% of it in the 08 takeover. But when we went to Paris, you know, aerospace is our largest, or one of our largest export markets. And we have, I think, close to 130 aerospace companies in Georgia, which I didn't really realize. I mean, you know about, you know, obviously companies like Delta, Gulfstream. We have big Pratt & Whitney facility in Columbus. We actually announced an expansion while we were over there at the air show. It's a division of Raytheon, which is RTX now, I think. But they're doing a $200 million expansion over there, about 250 jobs, and they do all the service work or the rebuilds on jet engines on like the A320 and other things that Delta and a lot of other companies are flying. So they take the engines down there, do them the once over, and then go back. So that's a big feather in our cap. But we have a huge defense industry too when you think about Lockheed Martin and a lot of the other companies. But we also have very small suppliers, people that are just making a part or a fabric or a seat or something else. And then we're on the innovative side of that too. We've got Archer Aviation that's going at the Covington Airport. They're going to create 1,000 jobs. They're a California-based company that's going to do their manufacturing in Georgia. Shocker there. But you know, it's a vertical eVTOL, you know, electric vehicle, vertical takeoff. My hope is that we maybe could use that during the World Cup to cart some people around. But we got to see the prototype vehicle when we were over in Paris and met with the CEO and the chairman of Stellantis, who's a big investor for them. And so this company's real, and there's 2 or 3 of them that are real that are out there, and we've got one of them in Georgia. So it's pretty exciting that we've got, you know, old kind of traditional things, but then we've also got the new innovative. One of the other things, we have a company that's making sustainable aviation fuel, which is very important for the industry and something that we're very supportive of. So we have a lot of really good things, not only now for the industry, but also in the future.
All right, so I have a number of other questions, but I've gotten a signal that I got one more. And so...
You sure you don't want me to ask you one?
Very short, yes. And so
You want me to make news today and not you, right?
that is the goal. That is the goal. And in fact, you know that I know what question you want to ask me. And when I talk to reporters sort of in the off the record portion, they're like, "I'm sorry I had to ask that question, but if I didn't ask this question, my bosses would fire me." Like it'd be malpractice, a media malpractice. And so this is actually a question on the card, so I'm not making this up. Will you be running for the Senate?
Well, at least you didn't ask me if I was going to run for president. I appreciate that.
I thought the question was going to have that parenthetically, but it didn't, so I left that off. But you can answer that one too if you want.
Well, my answer on the U.S. Senate question in 2026 is that we need to stay focused, in my opinion, on 2024 and not worry about 2026. And so that's what the First Lady and I are doing. We're staying focused on 2024, and we don't have a U.S. Senate race up in 2024.
You answered that as well as I usually answer mine. So.
Governor Kemp and Raphael, thank you for a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your leadership. First Lady Marty, thank you for being back with us. Please make a note of our upcoming programs, as you'll see on the screen. Next week, Director Kemp with the U.S. Secret Service. August 14th, Alan Shaw, the CEO of Norfolk Southern. And our August 21st meeting will be Rotary on the Road at the Porsche headquarters. Let's give the governor another hand, please.